Hey, Unchainers! This is Timmert, and you're listening to the Unchaining Me podcast. Hello, my friends. Welcome to this episode of the Unchaining Me podcast. I'm so glad you decided to tune in. If this is your first time stopping by, welcome. And I do hope you decide to stay, become family, and join us on this unchaining journey, the best journey of our lives. If you are a returning unchainer, well, welcome too. And thank you so much for your support and your encouragement and everything that you guys do. It encourages me and really inspires me to keep doing what I'm doing. So I want to take a moment to just say thank you. Thank you so much to each and every one of you. Well, this episode is another special one to me because it's May and it's Mental Health Awareness Month. 2021, the theme is Tools to Thrive. And one of my favorite things about this is that thriving is possible even after mental illness. You don't just survive it. It's not just survival that's out there as an option for you, but thriving is there too. And I am a living, walking, talking, podcasting example of that. Most of you guys know that I share very openly my struggles with depression and anxiety, my treatment, everything that I went through, my past with suicide attempts, so many things that were in my past. It's something that I share openly in the hopes that someone out there who is where I used to be, struggling with it, not knowing that there is thriving at the other end, not knowing that they're surviving, because at some point I truly believed that this would bring mental illness, depression would bring the end to my life. So it has become a meaning for me, a source of purpose for me to reach out into the lives of people who are struggling. So I love the theme this year because it makes thriving a possibility, brings that into the realm of existence for many people who are struggling, because that is a big foggy thing to think of, that thriving could be possible. So I wanted to take this episode and to talk about how thriving became a possibility for me. In short, what lessons I took from my journey with depression. How am I better now because I went through depression? And it's very difficult to think of something so hard, something so painful, something so dark to come into our lives, and we suffer that. And it's so difficult to think that there could be a silver lining to it, that there could be priceless things that we can walk away from it that we would not have known otherwise, or we would not have learned otherwise. So I want to bring that to you guys, share that. I have never really shared this on any platform before, and it's something that is so personal to me. But that is one of the things that give me a sense of meaning and purpose, sharing openly about it, because silence is something that makes depression worse. Depression festers when we hide from one another. So I've made it a mission to talk about that as openly as I can, because, it's not just my story, it's also my kids and my family. So I'm mindful about, how open I am or how deep I go into those dark corners of my past. But there's also a part of me that says, what if it happens again? What if I get depressed again? And I am at a place where I allow myself to be. I am comfortable with the idea or with the potential that I could go through depression again. Something could happen in my life and I could be susceptible to depression again, but I know for sure that I won't be the same person going through it. I know that it won't take me as low as it's taken me before, and that I know the tools already. I know the tools to thrive, that I know not only surviving but thriving is possible. So it's not going to be the rock bottom that I've hit before. So even that is one lesson. Well, I've already dived into sharing the lessons with you guys. I get very inspired when I talk about it because it's something that I know the ins and outs of. And something so painful, something so dark has become a reason of really joy and gratitude for me. And that's what I want to share with you guys now. Lessons that I have learned because I went through depression. Well, here it goes. Lesson number 1 for me was that if a feeling arises, if a feeling comes to you, it's valid, and your emotions are not your enemies. That's one of the biggest lessons I learned because of depression, because for most of the times that I was depressed, what made the pain worse was that I was fighting the emotions. I felt terrible for feeling it. I felt that there was something wrong with me for feeling it, that I was abnormal, that something was wrong. And of course, the culture that raised me told me that crazy was what I was. And that word is something that just brought so much shame and so much low esteem to myself. I'm crazy. There's something wrong with me. I was at odds with my emotions. I fought them. I did not want to have them. But what I learned through the tools that I received through therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy being the main one, through all those group sessions that I spent with other people who were also struggling, I started learning that emotions are just there. Emotions are actually our best friends. Emotions teach us things about our environments, things that we need to know about people around us, about situations that may cause us discomfort. They are our ears and eyes, emotionally speaking, about how safe, unsafe, conducive, not conducive, joyous or not joyous, how our environment is. They bring the possibility of realizing what our environment is made of and if it's something that we want to continue being around or not. They are our senses into the energies and emotions around us. So emotions are not things that we need to fight with. That was, as simple as it may sound, something that I did not know. And some of you out there may be asking the same questions, maybe fighting your emotions right now, maybe finding it really difficult to validate. And one thing that was very difficult for me also was that word itself, validation itself, was something that I did not know what to do. I didn't validate anything for myself. I didn't validate my life choices for myself. I looked externally to find that validation from other people. So forget validating emotions that I considered negative or wrong or shameful. But I didn't even validate who I was. My existence wasn't valid unless some particular person at certain phase of my life was willing to validate that or could see something valid about me. So this process was not easy for me to validate emotions that I was taught to consider wrong. I learned that just because I'm depressed does not mean those emotions are wrong. I learned to figure out what the underlying cause could be for those emotions. What was there in my life? What was my attention being directed to? What was that emotion to tell me, to point me towards? So instead of fighting the feeling, I learned to embrace it. I learned to sit with it. I learned to feel it. If it was anger, I felt it, every ounce of it. If it was sadness, I sat down with it, felt it, every bit of it. If I felt like crying, if that's what the emotion needed, I honored it. I cried. I sobbed. If I wanted to write it down and journal about it, I did exactly that. Most of the pain I realized in the past was coming from me resisting those emotions instead of opening the door and letting them in and honoring them. And I started asking questions and challenging the school of thought that my thinking was built on. I started challenging why I was so against my own emotions, and I was able to shift some paradigms about that. The second lesson, and I would argue that this is the most important, is that vulnerability is not weakness. That took me a long time to realize, but I did eventually. And when I did, it was the most strengthening, the most empowering thing I have really ever realized. Because I'm a vulnerable person. I'm an open person. There's a reason I'm able to do this on a larger scale and talk about my personal life, talk about my weaknesses, past and present, over podcasts and meetings and, even in a client coaching sessions. There's a reason I'm able to open up my not so strong or not so favorable parts of me. And that's because I have really always been an open person. But the issue with vulnerability without realizing its power is that it drains you because you're thinking it's weakness, right? So you're being open, you're being vulnerable, you're doing it, it's a good thing, but then you're hating yourself for doing it because you're expecting the other person to validate, you're expecting the other person to be vulnerable back. And when that doesn't happen, you go back into self-loathing, self-destructive ways, and depression thrives on that. And over time, I realized that, yes, there is such a thing as being vulnerable to the wrong people. Yes, there is. Some people don't value it or don't value it as of yet at the time. And some people are just not there. And they leave you thinking there's something wrong with you for opening up. And some people just can't carry the things that you're sharing with them. They're just not built for that, or they're not built for that at that moment. But regardless, my vulnerability is what made sure that I thrived, because I was able to be vulnerable in front of a therapist, in front of a complete stranger. That's vulnerability. I was vulnerable to friends and family, and the right people were able to validate my feelings for me. The right people were able to show me love and acceptance and nurture me emotionally. And vulnerability is what got me that. And eventually I realized that there is no true connection without vulnerability. There's no true power. There's no true love without vulnerability and true vulnerability. So that is something that was made possible through depression for me. Lesson number 3 might also sound simple, but it's profound. Life goes on. Life goes on. Cliche, right? Many people say that. Oh, life goes on. But the moment I truly realized that everything you feel, every situation, the heartbreak, the pain, the suffering, it passes. Everything passes. Even joyous moments pass. Unfortunate for us, right? But we don't think of that when we're going through a joyous experience. We're not fighting with what is. We're not fighting with the present moment. So we're not really thinking about, oh, it's here to stay. We don't think of it like that. We're busy just enjoying it. We're busy just being in the moment. But when we are suffering something, we want it to go away so bad that the minutes and the seconds and the days elongate themselves. They seem to last forever, but they don't. That was a simple yet profound lesson I learned while going through depression. And I've taken that lesson with me to everyday life. As a mom of 5 kids in a blended family, things are very dynamic. Our lives are moving. I don't have a sense of control sometimes. There's so many moving parts to our lives, and I could easily find myself loathing and negating something. I could easily find myself disappointed or overwhelmed. And this lesson, life goes on, surfaces. And it saves me from myself. It saves me from the illusion that disappointment, that discomfort could go on forever. It doesn't. It doesn't even go on for a day. Most times, you go to sleep, right? That's an interruption. Thank God for sleep. That's an interruption. That's a reset button for nature. My husband is in IT, and he tells me rebooting something is always the best thing you can do. And I use that even for myself. And we must, all of us. Life goes on. Everything changes. Everything is dynamic. Nothing lasts forever. Nope, not even that pain, not even that disappointment, not even that deep, deep heartbreak that you're going through right now. It doesn't go on forever. Even if you wanted it to, a moment won't last forever. Depression is real. It can happen to anyone, even the happiest ones, the silent ones, whoever. But hope is also real. Courage is real. Resilience, it's real. And it doesn't matter how slowly we go, as long as we don't stop, as long as we keep moving, as long as we don't look back, as long as we don't entertain the thought of stopping. It goes on. Life supports momentum. As long as we realize that, then we're going to be okay. That's a lesson that I cherish and I continue to use. Another lesson has to do with guilt. One of the things that made my depression worse was feeling guilty for where I was. How could I be depressed? How could I be here? I'm in America. I am privileged beyond belief. There are many people that I know that would kill for this opportunity to come to America and have a life, have a warm shower every day, forget everything else. So I felt guilty. I looked at my kids, my son specifically, and I felt guilty that I was being depressed when I had such a beautiful child in and out, healthy. I have a child. How can I be depressed? Isn't that what everybody prays for? I am an able-bodied, physically, minus mentally, of course. I'm an able-bodied person. How could I cripple myself to this bed and to this couch and not leave my house for days, my apartment for days, for weeks sometimes? I felt so much guilt. And I learned how to differentiate guilt from accepting reality and accountability. Now, there are things that you could be accountable for. If you're thinking about a mistake that you have made, someone that you have hurt, accountability is the way to go. You take responsibility because it's future focused. Accountability is something that is going to get you results, not guilt. Guilt is focused in the past. Guilt is based on this shame and punishment cycle. It's basically whoever used to punish you for doing something wrong, you've taken over from them and you're doing that to yourself now. That's what guilt is. And of course, I was feeling guilty over something that is a disease, a chemical imbalance that I could not control. That meant I needed help. That meant my body needed help to keep its balance, its homeostasis when it comes to hormones and neurotransmitters. Another lesson I learned was to learn how to say thank you, or to learn how to feel gratitude and thankfulness instead of feeling guilty for my friends and family for putting them through being with someone who is severely depressed, especially my husband. I felt so much guilt that here's this man, he's given me this love, and of course he's going to make a mistake and take it personally. That was something that I had to deal with the help of my therapist, to make sure that he knew it wasn't his fault. It wasn't something about him. But it was very difficult for him, for a person who is day and night trying to make me happy, to be dealing with someone so depressed as I was. And I felt so guilty on top of that. I felt so guilty to have this good man go through what I was making him go through, or so I thought. And I learned that guilt would just add to my pain. But I could channel that guilt into showing him the most gratitude that I could show him. The thankfulness that I was showing him for being there for me, for accepting my vulnerability, for being vulnerable in return, for being there, listening to me, for reminding me to take my medications, for doing meditations with me, taking me on walks, just everything that he was doing to be a supportive partner. I learned how to just accept that as I deserve it and I needed it. And I learned to say thank you to that instead of suffer in guilt as I was. And that was a skill, y'all. That was a skill I didn't have. I did not feel almost throughout my life that I deserved to be cared for and to get those loving acts of service from someone. I was that person to be for others, to do for others those same things, most times in an anxious attachment of please please me, please love me, requests from me, not verbal, of course. But here there was a man, a person, a partner doing all of that for me, and I felt for the most part bad until I was able to unlock a part of me that just showed and channeled gratitude instead of guilt. Lesson number next, I lost track. Not everybody is going to understand how it is to go through depression. They're not going to understand what I'm going through because for the most part, if someone has not gone through depression, it's very hard to know what a person is going through when they say they're depressed or when they are depressed. There are people who are highly empathic that are able to hold space for you even though they've never been there, that are able to listen, to ask, to understand, to be curious instead of making judgments and passing them. But for the most part, I think it's safe to assume that if that person has not suffered through it, they really may not understand what I'm going through. So it helped me to go from that place and be positively surprised if that person did understand. And become okay with that person not understanding. Again, I talked about earlier that self-validation, that was key for me, validating my emotions, validating my feelings, accepting the fact that this is what's going on. I am going through depression. So then it makes it easier on that person. It made it easier for me when another person wasn't showing as much empathy, wasn't showing as much support as I would have preferred, I would have liked. The last lesson that I'm going to share with y'all here on this podcast is that there is such a thing as learning how to be happy, that it doesn't just come naturally. And dare I say, for most of us, it doesn't, because our idea of happiness is mostly external. It's because we have this, it's because we have that, material things, or even people. It's because I have so and so, then I will become happy. I learned through depression that I had to take myself back to the drawing board to learn the basics of happiness. How to feel it, how to allow myself to feel happiness. What was there sabotaging my ability to feel joy? What were the thoughts that were against me being present in myself and being able to feel joy? And I found so many things that I didn't know were there. This path that I'm on, the Unchaining Me path, everything that I was able to create because of it would not have come to pass if it wasn't for me going through depression. My rock bottom was because of depression, and I am grateful for it. I would not have been a person who's able to relate to someone going through depression or just feeling terrible. Simply, my empathy is one of the best things about me. And depression was something that gave me that empathy, that level of empathy and vulnerability and being able to connect to someone on a deeper level. It increased my curiosity. There's nothing I take for granted. I'm okay with not being sure. I'll learn. I'll find out. I'll read about it. I'll research it. I'll ask. I'll teach myself. And this almost childlike curiosity I have learned to love and appreciate was because depression robbed me of any control and assurance in life and in myself. It felt very uncomfortable to be out of control, to not feel like I can control even getting out of bed and brushing my teeth and taking a shower. It was a very weakening kind of sensation when I was going through it. But on the other end, I got out of it with a sense of freedom and liberation because I'll learn. Even if it's things about myself, I'll learn. I continue to learn things about myself. Motherhood is teaching me every day many different things about myself. I've learned to be gentle with different corners of myself that I keep discovering. And that I owe to depression. Before I end this podcast, I want to give you to the person who is in your life who's going through depression. I want to give you a list of things to say to them. You know, there are many things to not say to depressed people or people going through depression, but I want to end this with a list of things to actually tell them, to spend the time, to take the time and remind them. You're not crazy and you're not alone. Tell them you're not crazy, you're not alone. You may know it, but they may not. Somebody else may be telling them they're crazy. They themselves could be telling themselves they're crazy. So take the time to remind them that that's not the case and tell them you're there. You're there for them. And there are many people out there going through the same trials. Remind them that the world is beautiful because depression robs you of those eyes to see beauty, especially see beauty in the world. Remind them that they know it already. It's just hidden from them temporarily. But beauty is there. It exists. If they look out their window, there's beauty. If they look into the mirror, there's beauty there too. Remind them that. Tell them that they're not a burden on you or anybody else, that they're not bad as a friend or as a partner or as a daughter or as a son, as a cousin. Whatever they are to you, tell them that they're not playing that role wrong. That was one of the things that really affected me, was thinking I'm a bad mom, I'm a bad mom, I'm a bad mom, I'm a bad wife, I'm a bad friend because I'm depressed. Remind that person that that's not the case. It will liberate them. It will make things easier. Remind them how important they are just because they're alive, just because they exist, just because they're a human being. Remind them that. Tell them that the same elements that are in the stars that make up the universe are in their bodies, in their blood, in their bones, in their hair, in their skin. Remind them how special they are, how precious they are. And last but not least, tell them, just like the beauty out there in the world, their strength is also hidden from them, but it exists. We don't stop believing in gravity because we don't see it, do we? It's there. We know it's there. Remind them of that strength, that power, that energy, and empower them. Give them hope to see another day. And again, life goes on. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. And please share it to someone whom you suspect may be going through depression and struggling. Let's end the cycle of suffering. And don't forget to support by liking, rating, subscribing, and sharing with your family and friends. Thank you so much, and see you with the next episode.